What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to talk about my Week 6 trade targets for fantasy football. Of course, as always, every Tuesday, I bring you guys 5 buys and 3 sells, going over some of the biggest names in fantasy football. I basically go through this in a similar theme. The last few I've done have always been focused on acquiring elite talent at low prices, because that is how I believe you win fantasy championships, by having those studs, having those elite talents to help contribute to your lineups. And a lot of those elite talents are underperforming. It's very predictable to assume that they're not going to always be like that, because we've seen them produce in the past. We know how good of players they are, and it's just a matter of public perception that we're taking advantage of. Guys who are getting the usage but are potentially positive regression candidates are basically what we're going to be focused on today. Now, before I get into this, a quick review of what I talked about last week, just because I wanted to quickly talk about it. Kyle Pitts and DeAndre Hopkins were 2 trade targets that I said you should be going out and acquiring last week. They definitely paid off in a big way, but Dalvin Cook, Stephon Diggs, and Calvin Ridley haven't paid off yet. Dalvin Cook and Calvin Ridley, of course, didn't play. Calvin Ridley due to personal reasons, and Dalvin Cook still dealing with his ankle injury. And then Stephon Diggs had another down game. But all those guys that I talked about last week, mainly those 3 that are still, underperforming, are definitely still good trade targets for you guys to go out and get. But before I get into some of the guys that we're going to talk about today, we got to hit the intro. Okay, first guy on the list, Sir Arthur Juan Brown, A.J. Brown of the Tennessee Titans. He is going to be my number 1 trade target for the week this week. And the reason is because we've seen A.J. Brown perform at an elite level in the past. Of course, we know he's one of the most talented receivers in the league, and he is getting unlucky as unlucky can be, basically, to start the season so far. Of course, in weeks 1 and 2, he had a 23% target share in both games, was running about 90% of the reps. He just simply wasn't producing for fantasy, and that is going to come. Of course, in week 3 and week 4, he was dealing with a hamstring injury, left week 3 early, missed week 4, and then came back last week in week 5. And he is not a guy that has been producing at a high level for fantasy. I'm sure a lot of you guys that drafted A.J. Brown probably drafted him in the late 2nd round, early 3rd round of your fantasy drafts. Similar theme, though, to the Falcons guys. This is a new coordinator with Arthur Smith gone. They've been kind of dealing with injuries in and out of the lineup with Julio Jones and with A.J. Brown. It's going to take time for this offense to gel and get back on track. I think that's going to start going forward. They have an easier schedule. It's starting to open up a little bit more. This week specifically, they do play the Buffalo Bills, who are a good, they're a good team and they're a good defense, but they're going to have to throw the ball. They're not going to be able to do what they did to the Jacksonville Jaguars last week when A.J. Brown ran only 24 routes, played 41 of 64 snaps, and they basically just ran the ball all over Jacksonville, blew them out, and pounded the ball and salted the game away with Derrick Henry. Like I said, this week presents a tougher matchup in terms of their need to score points. And I think A.J. Brown can get back on track this week, even though Buffalo is a tough defense. They're going to try and take away a guy like A.J. Brown, but I think he gets back on track by sheer volume in this game this week and going forward. His deep target catch rate, as you guys can see on the screen, courtesy of Hayden Winks, good friend of the show, you can see him right down at the bottom left corner. A.J. Brown right down there with Kenny Golladay as a guy who's been unlucky/bad on deep targets. That's going to correct itself. We know A.J. Brown's not a bad receiver. We know Ryan Tannehill is not a bad quarterback. That's going to correct itself eventually. And he's going to get back on track to the guy that he was last year, where when you threw him a deep ball, more often than not, he'd come down with it and he'd make a play. So as you can see on the screen, these are some of the trades that are occurring involving A.J. Brown. And this is the reason why he's a buy low candidate, because to me, I still view him as a top 15 receiver rest of season. Maybe he's not the top 5 receiver that we thought he could be, because this new offense is a little bit less efficient than it was with Arthur Smith calling the shots, and they're passing the ball at a pretty low rate in neutral game scripts. But this is still a guy that I think can be a top 15 receiver, and I would much rather have him than Tyler Lockett. As you guys can see, that was a trade that went down. I'd much rather have him than Myles Gaskin. That's not even close. Same with Allen Robinson. Also not close. And you can see some of these 2-for-1s are also good trades. A.J. Brown and Chase Edmonds for Dak Prescott and Damian Harris in a 1-quarterback league. I think that's a phenomenal trade to make. A.J. Brown for Darrell Williams and Chase Claypool. I made a similar trade to that in my home league. I traded away Chase Claypool and Quintez Cephas for A.J. Brown, basically. So if you can pull off a trade like that, where you can take a wide receiver 2 type and, add a small waiver piece or something like that, and get A.J. Brown, who is a certified stud. We know he's a stud at football. We know he is one of the most talented wide receivers in the league. It's only a matter of time. The volume is there. The usage is there. The ability is there. It's just a matter of getting the fantasy points that he hasn't gotten yet. And that will come in time as this offense figures itself out and as he gets more acclimated coming off the hamstring injury that he was coming off of. So a similar theme, again, another receiver that you took in that late second round, early third round range that has been underperforming relative to expectation and for a specific reason is Keenan Allen, another guy that I'm actively buying this week in fantasy football. Currently the wide receiver 17 right now in PPR leagues. It's not bad, right? Wrong. The reason it's bad is because Mike Williams is the wide receiver 2 in PPR. His teammate, Mike Williams, who a lot of people coming into the season thought was an afterthought. He was a guy that could potentially break out, but even if he does break out, he's not going to be better than Keenan Allen, right? But he has been better than Keenan Allen, especially in people's perception, because they've seen these big plays when they're watching Red Zone. They've seen Mike Williams taking the top off the defense and catching 72-yard touchdowns. But Keenan Allen isn't a guy that you need to be sleeping on, basically. 10.6 targets per game to Mike Williams' 10.2 targets per game. Keenan Allen also best Mike Williams in red zone targets and in air yard share, even after this game. So the point is that these guys should be much closer in terms of where they're being valued, but that is not the case right now. A lot of people, you'd be hard pressed to take Mike Williams away from them because he has been phenomenal for fantasy this year. And this is not a slight to Mike Williams. I just think they're a lot closer than they should be, and they're not being valued in that regard. Yes, Keenan Allen won't get the deep looks that Mike Williams gets. He won't probably catch those deep bombs that we saw Mike Williams catch, but those red zone targets are valuable in this offense with Justin Herbert playing the way he is. And those 8 to 10 reception games in PPR leagues will help you achieve that ceiling, right? Because a 30-point game from Mike Williams looks a lot different than a 30-point game from Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen is the third down target. He's the guy that gets all the receptions. So he can have those 8 to 10 reception games where he goes 10 for 125 and a touchdown, and that gets you to 30 points. But Mike Williams is more of the 7 for 156 and a touchdown guy off of a long, deep play. So they're different receivers, but they're both extremely valuable. They're both top 12 fantasy receivers for me rest of season. And the reason is because this offense is going to be highly efficient and highly productive for these wide receivers. As you guys can see on the screen, the top 10 wide receivers in fantasy usage over the last 4 games, so since week 1, are Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Calvin Ridley, Terry McLaurin, Mike Evans, Deebo Samuel, DJ Moore. And then right at 9 and 10, right at 8 and 9 are Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. So both of these guys are able to be very productive because they both get deep usage. They both get red zone usage. They both get a lot of targets. And it's because this offense is using their fantasy receivers as a funnel. This offense runs through Mike Williams, runs through Keenan Allen, and it runs through Austin Eckler. And pretty much nobody else gets consistent production, which is exactly what we want for fantasy. We don't want to have to guess which week if Jalen Guyton's going to outproduce Mike Williams or anything like that, because that never happens. And this offense also runs at a top 5 rate in neutral pace. It also runs at a top 5 rate in neutral pass rate. So these receivers can both be productive. Keenan Allen is extremely undervalued right now by most of the people that drafted him because they're seeing his teammate outproduce him to such a high degree. And as you guys can see with some of the trades have occurred, you can get Keenan Allen at a big time discount. If you can get Keenan Allen for a mid RB2 like Chris Carson, do it every single day of the week. If you can get Keenan Allen for a high-end RB3 and a high-end wide receiver 3 like Antonio Brown and Myles Gaskin respectively, then you should be going out and doing that. Again, a lot of these trades you're going to see on the screen are trades that you can make in your home leagues. You might not think you can make them, but people are going to be tilting about Keenan Allen, Mike Davis, and Jacoby Myers. I doubt you can make a trade like that, but those 2-for-1s are great upgrades to get from 2 guys that are kind of fringe level, wide receiver 3s, running back 3s, to get up to a wide receiver 1 like Keenan Allen or a back end wide receiver 1, whatever you want to call him. So he is a guy that I'm actively targeting, a guy that I'm actively going out and trying to make offers for. The third guy on this list is another wide receiver, and wide receivers are usually great trade targets in general because we know who the studs are and we know where the targets and the usage are coming from. And none is a bigger example than Cooper Kupp. And Cooper Kupp, at the start of the season, you'd be hard pressed to trade anybody for Cooper Kupp because the first 3 weeks of the season, he was on a historic pace. But Cooper Kupp is human, guys. It looks like he's not going to be the best receiver in fantasy football history. But what is unreal about this is that he is the only wide receiver in the NFL thus far that has had a 30% target share in every game that he's played. He's had over 10 targets in every single game that he's played. Not even Devontae Adams has done that. This is a rest of season top 5 wide receiver in the NFL and in fantasy. So you can get a small discount on Cooper Kupp right now. And again, as I talked about for Dalvin Cook, you're still going to have to pay a hefty price for Cooper Kupp because people know what they have in him, but it's a small discount relative to what you had to pay 2 weeks ago. And it's also worth noting that coming off of 2 down games, they have a very easy schedule over the next 4 weeks against the New York Giants, Detroit Lions, Houston Texans, and Tennessee Titans. All of these defenses are bottom half of the NFL in weighted DVOA against the pass. And 3 of those 4 defenses, Houston being the one that is not, are bottom 5 in the NFL in weighted DVOA against the pass. So all these defenses are going to present a lot of opportunity for Cooper Kupp to feast and Cooper Kupp to eat. But if you can sell high on a guy like Antonio Gibson or Jonathan Taylor or James Robinson or Cordarelle Patterson or Marquise Brown or Jamar Chase or some of these guys they're great. They're good options, right? But they're not Cooper Kupp. And you could probably take Antonio Gibson coming off of a big game or James Robinson or Jonathan Taylor, add in a small piece like Tyler Boyd or something like that, and get up to a guy like Cooper Kupp, who is a certified stud and is going to make a difference in your lineup each and every week, all season long. And of course, we know Robert Woods getting back on track in primetime is going to have an effect on people who own Cooper Kupp as well. So those 3 guys, those top 3 receivers, all 3 of them are rest of season wide receiver ones, basically, with the exception of AJ Brown just teetering on that range. And I'm actively going out and trying to get these guys, because if you have some of these guys that are overperforming, maybe Chase Claypool had a big game on your team, and you can turn him into a Keenan Allen, if you can turn him into a Cooper Kupp by adding a small piece, then I'm actively looking to do that, because I don't think you can rely on some of these fringe level players that are overperforming, but you can rely on the guys that I was talking about already. And speaking of guys that you can rely on, especially at this position, these 2 stud tight ends are guys that you need to be targeting. In Darren Waller and TJ Hawkinson, I'm going to group these guys together because it's the same argument, more or less. Yes, we're seeing guys like Dawson Knox and Dalton Schultz come through with big performances, and your stud tight end, Darren Waller, that you picked at the back of the 2nd round or the early 3rd round, or TJ Hawkinson, who you picked in the 5th round, has had a couple down weeks, but do not panic on these tight ends. These tight ends, especially Darren Waller, is getting 10 targets per game, nearly 10 targets per game, and 7 targets in every game thus far. TJ Hawkinson has been a little bit more inconsistent with his usage and with his volume, but nearly an 85% route participation. And one game he had like a 75% route participation. So it's more like 90% across the board for TJ Hawkinson. Is good for 3rd among tight ends, only behind Darren Waller, only behind Travis Kelce. His production will come. Do not panic on TJ Hawkinson either. Better yet, go buy these guys. If you don't have a stud tight end, if you don't have Kyle Pitts or Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce, I would be actively looking to buy these other 2 tight ends, because those are the clear top 5 for me tight ends rest of season. Of course, Dawson Knox, Dalton Schultz, some of these guys are playing well, but I don't put them in that category quite yet. And you can see on the screen with Darren Waller specifically, you can trade guys like Chris Carson plus Noah Fant, get up to a Darren Waller. That's a phenomenal trade if you can make a move like that, because those are, fringe level assets at their positions for a stud level asset at his position. And I'm always looking to be making trades like that. Damian Williams plus Kyle Pitts. Again, Kyle Pitts to me is closing the gap between him and Darren Waller, but I would still prefer Darren Waller rest of season. George Kittle plus Josh Jacobs with George Kittle's injury. Give me the Darren Waller side of that all day. Cortland Sutton and Dallas Goedert. Again, a 2-for-1 that if you can get up to a stud like Darren Waller is absolutely worth it. And same goes for TJ Hawkinson, although at a bit of a discounted price. You can see TJ Hawkinson being mixed into some of these trade packages, trading away Kareem Hunt and Jamison Crowder, getting back TJ Hawkinson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's going to miss a couple weeks. I think that's a great move. Somebody traded Dawson Knox straight up for TJ Hawkinson. Again, give me TJ Hawkinson rest of season. So those are 2 tight ends that I'm absolutely looking to acquire. The only reason they're on this list is because yesterday on the live stream, a lot of you guys expressed concern about these guys. And if you're thinking it, I'm sure your league mates, for those of you guys that don't have those players, are also thinking it. So go out and acquire those guys if you can. Moving off of the buy lows into the sell highs. Some of the sell highs that we're going to be talking about here real quick. Dawson Knox, again, this is literally nothing to do with the player. I think Dawson Knox is here to stay. I think he's a top 10, top 12 tight end rest of season. I just personally think he's currently at peak value. Everybody saw him on Sunday Night Football catch a long bomb touchdown, and everybody's thinking, oh man, this guy's here to stay. This is a guy that we all missed on as a fantasy community, and me included. I definitely missed on Dawson Knox. So this isn't me covering my own ass because I was low on the guy, but he's had 3 of 5 games with less than 5 targets. This isn't a guy that is a true difference maker at the tight end position. He's a big play threat. Could be this year's Robert Tonyan, this year's Logan Thomas type of tight end, but this is not a guy that's going to achieve Darren Waller, TJ Hawkinson, Kyle Pitts levels, in my opinion. And I'm willing to bet you can get TJ Hawkinson straight up for Dawson Knox, like we talked about already, plus a guy like Damian Williams or something like that for Darren Waller. If you wanted to take Dawson Knox and add in a Damian Williams, add in a Tyler Boyd, somebody like that, you could probably get up to Darren Waller, for example. And I think that is a true difference-making trade that can help your team tremendously. I'm all about consciously upgrading my team. I know that you guys, whoever has Dawson Knox on their team right now, probably picked him up on waivers and they're like, oh, I found a diamond in the rough. This is a true gem. I'm going to sit on this guy and he's going to be my tight end the rest of the season. But if you get complacent like that, you're never going to see your team get better. So Dawson Knox right now, in my opinion, currently at peak value, go ahead and try and parlay Dawson Knox with another asset. Get Darren Waller, who truly upgrades your team comparatively to Dawson Knox. So as you guys can see on the screen, some of the trades that have happened, some guy got Kareem Hunt straight up for Dawson Knox. Again, easy trade to make there. Some guy was able to parlay Dawson Knox and a couple other pieces into Aaron Jones. Some guy got Mike Davis and Tyler Higbee in exchange for Dawson Knox. And I think Higbee and Knox are a lot closer than a lot of people will think. Somebody got Clyde Edwards-Helaire for Dawson Knox. Some of these guys were able to get DK Metcalf and Stephon Diggs using Dawson Knox as a trade chip in that trade. So moving on to Cordarelle Patterson, again, another guy that's on the sell highs list for the second straight week. Maybe he's a rest of season RB2 or wide receiver 3, but the huge games have to chill at some point. That's basically my reasoning on Cordarelle Patterson. Now, it may be harder to sell a player who's currently on bye this week, but I'm still willing to move him before his shine wears off because I do think it's going to wear off eventually. This is why it's simply perceived value. This is the only reason for this trade is because of perceived value. And you guys can see some of the trades below that people are being able to execute using Cordarelle Patterson as a piece. Somebody got not just Stephon Diggs for Cordarelle Patterson, but they also got Chris Carson. Somebody used Cordarelle Patterson plus a wide receiver 3 like Antonio Brown and got up to a stud like DeAndre Swift. Somebody used a wide receiver 2, back-end wide receiver 2, like Brandon Cooks and Cordarelle Patterson and got a stud like Austin Eckler. Somebody used AJ Green and Deontay Johnson to get a stud like Dalvin Cook. This is what you should be using Cordarelle Patterson to do if you have him. Try and get one of these superstar fantasy assets that's going to make a big time difference in your team because Cordarelle Patterson, while he's performing well, is not going to have that same impact that a Dalvin Cook or DeAndre Swift will have on your team long term. So that's basically my thoughts on Cordarelle Patterson. The final sell high is Kareem Hunt. And again, it's nothing against Kareem Hunt either. It's all about what you can get for him. This is the current RB5 on the season in PPR leagues on the number 19 weighted opportunities among running backs. So the fact that he's outperforming his weighted opportunities by that high of a degree, and I think he's always going to do that a little bit because he's a great player in a great rushing offense, but I'd much rather swap him for a running back that sees much more volume and can produce more consistently. If you can pull off a trade like the one that I have circled here, that's money, right? If you can take Kareem Hunt and Robert Woods and get up to an Alvin Kamara, get up to a Dalvin Cook, get up to a Derrick Henry, get up to a Christian McCaffrey, or even, a Saquon Barkley, if you can handle that kind of loss for a couple of weeks, I think you might even be able to make a trade that's Kareem Hunt for Saquon straight up right now. You might even be able to do Kareem Hunt for Dalvin Cook with a small piece. Like I said, Kareem Hunt plus a small piece for Zeke Elliott or for Najee Harris or Aaron Jones or DeAndre Swift, somebody who has a secure workload that Kareem Hunt doesn't necessarily have because of Nick Chubb's presence on that team. Of course, Kareem Hunt always comes with the stipulation that if Nick Chubb gets hurt, he's going to be very valuable for fantasy, but I don't want to rely on that as a primary reason to hold on to a guy. Yes, he's the RB5 in fantasy right now, and he's outperforming Nick Chubb, but I don't expect that to continue for the remainder of the season. I expect them to kind of cannibalize each other, as we know that they can because they're both great running backs on a great rushing offense. And yes, there's plenty of volume to go around, but give me Zeke Elliott, give me Saquon Barkley, give me Najee Harris, give me these guys that have secure workloads each and every week. I know what I'm getting. So that's my thoughts on all the buy lows and sell highs for week 6 of fantasy football. Again, if you guys did enjoy this video, please go down to the bottom and hit the like button. It costs you absolutely nothing to do. And if you guys comment any of your thoughts down below, some of your start sit questions, trade target questions, I want to know that you also hit the like on the video and also subscribe to the channel if you are new to the channel as well. It looks like about 70 to 75% of you guys that watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. Now, I want you to do something to remedy that because if I've answered a question for you or if I've helped you out in any way, I think I've earned the subscription of you. It costs you nothing to do and it helps us out tremendously. So again, if you want access to our weekly rankings, you can go to the website, thefantasystockexchange.com, to find out how. Peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.